Algebra 2, Unit 10, Core 2, looking at the statistical study, the basic steps. Sample methods, let's look at the Part 2 notes. So let's talk about how to sample well. The best way to avoid bias in your sampling is to let chance choose the sample. This is why we use a simple random sampling as the source for most of our studies. Here's how it works. After you assign each member of the population a number, there are different ways that you can create a simple random sample. You can use technology. So on a calculator or website, you can use a random number generator program to generate numbers and create your sample. Use a random number table. So locate a printed random number table, and you can see one below. Read consecutive groups of digits of appropriate length across a line. So ignore any group that wasn't used as a label or duplicates a label. So below is a portion of a printed random digit table. If we were using this to create a sample of 20 students from our 60-person class, we would assign numbers 1 through 60 to each class member. Look at the first two digits of the number working left to right. So the first 5 students chosen for the sample would correspond with the numbers 11, and then we move to the next column, 36, and then we would skip 75 because we only have 60 in our group, then 37, then 26, then 10. You may be thinking, well, I could put the numbers on a paper and, put them in a hat and then draw them out. Or I could just randomly think of numbers. So both of those, when they involved humans creating the sample like that, would have some bias. And so this way, either using a table where digits were randomly generated from an impassionate machine, or a random number generator program, that will help cut down bias. All right, now you try. So each year the State Department of Education randomly selects 3 schools from each district and conducts a detailed audit of their attendance records. There are 19 schools in the entire district. Describe how to select a simple random sample in this situation. So pause the video, come up with an idea and write it down, and then come back and we'll compare answers. All right, welcome back. So what I came up with is to number the schools 1 through 19 and then use technology or a table to randomly generate 3 numbers. To select those 3 numbers that correspond with those schools. So let's look back at the table and let's see what that would look like. So going left from right, and this time we're going to just choose 2 digits from, so we would choose 11, and we would skip 36, 75, we're scanning, and then we would choose 10 from the number 10431, and then we would choose 19. So schools corresponding with the numbers 11, 10, and 19. Now let's look at sampling methods and think about the bias that may or may not be introduced. So for each of the following situations, identify what method is used and then explain how bias in the sampling method could affect the results. So, A farmer brings a juice company several crates of oranges each week. An inspector looks at 10 oranges from the top of each crate before deciding to buy all the oranges. So this sounds like a convenient sample if the inspector is just grabbing 10 oranges from the top. So that means that not every orange in the crate has an equal chance of being inspected. And so that would create some bias there, just certain oranges being under or overrepresented because only the top are inspected. And because of that, then the inspector could over or underestimate the quality of the oranges. Let's look at B. The ABC program Nightline once asked if the United Nations should continue to have its headquarters in the United States. Viewers were invited to call a telephone number to respond yes and another to respond no. There was a charge for calling either number. More than 186,000 callers responded, and 67% of them said no. So if you think about this type of sampling, this is self-selected because people are volunteering to call in. Now the bias that may be introduced is because of the whole population of viewers of Nightline, not everyone has an equal chance because it is a volunteer sample. And the poll attracts Nightline viewers and then also possibly those with strong opinions because you have to be willing to pay the fee to either say no or yes. And no's, sorry about that, they could be overestimated. Likewise, the yeses could be underestimated. The administration at our school wants to know the proportion of students that did all their homework last night. So they select a simple random sample of 100 students and send an email to each of them asking if they did all their homework last night. Of the 40 responses, 36 of the students said they did all their homework last night. That's 90% of students saying that. Identify the sampling method used, then explain how bias in the sampling method could affect the results. So at first you may think, oh, this is a simple random sample because a group was created of 100 students using that method, but then it became a volunteer or a self-selected sample because those students got to choose whether or not they responded to the email. So it starts as a simple random sample, but then is self-selected. And thinking about the results being skewed one way, so there probably is some bias in this situation. Only 40 responded, so there could be a non-response bias. So it could be that the 60 are the ones who did not complete, or many of them who did not complete their homework. So that would be what we would call a non-response bias. So people of one particular opinion mostly not responding. There could also be response bias with an unwillingness to admit that you're not doing your homework because the survey was from the administration. So students may not want to admit that. All right, the school librarian wants to know the average number of pages in all the books in the library. The library has 20,000 books arranged by type, fiction, biography, history, and so on, in shelves that hold about 50 books each. Explain how to select a simple random sample of 500 books. Well, you could number those books 1 to 20,000 and then use a random number generator or a table to generate 500 numbers that correspond with books. For B, explain how to select a stratified random sample of 500 books. So this is where we would group the books into subgroups first and then randomly choose from those subgroups. So you could divide into type categories that were mentioned, fiction, biography, history, and then divide 500 by the number of categories. So let's say there are 8 categories, divide 500 by 8, and then randomly select that number of books from each category. C, explain how to select a cluster sample. So we need to divide into categories, so we could divide into type categories again, and then we would randomly choose entire category groups to read, so all are to count, reaching until we reached 500 books. So all the fiction, all the history, etc. Which sampling method do you believe would be best to most accurately estimate the average number of pages in all the books in the library? So, if we think about it, a simple random sample would be good. Stratified random would probably be all right also, and it might actually be best in this situation. So, because if you think about it, oftentimes certain types of books hover around a certain number of pages. So, history books may be, on the whole, have a longer page number count than maybe a biography or fiction. So, a random sample, either a simple random sample where all the books in the library have an equal chance of being chosen, or stratified where they are divided into types of books, and then from that type, all of those books in the type have an equal chance of being selected for their pages to be counted.